Phone's on silent.
So my phone's not on silent. My phone is always on silent. I know. You know. That's it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Talkbox. I got a good guest, a good A-sider. I think we always get good guests, but I'm particularly excited when I get this guy in. As I tweeted out earlier on @Woodsy1069, as far as the executives go, he's amongst my favorite. There might not be a more favorite. I don't want to insult anyone, but Stephen Espinoza combines intelligence. And then I was searching for what else. And I thought to myself, and I said, I think I tweeted out, good humor. Decent guy, not a dick.
Well, I can be.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, we all can. We all can be.
Well, I might be your favorite, but it's a rapidly dying breed. That used to mean something. So, you know, when I look at the list of candidates for favorite boxing television executives, like it's if we're talking about active current.
Well, it is a dwindling list, but respect and appreciation for you you doing this, because you know, you don't have to.
Well, you know, maybe we start there because
you
know the interesting thing is we've seen some new entries. We've seen DAZN, we've seen ESPN,
right.
And there's basically two ways to go about the sport, and that's the way that the premium networks generally have, which is you hire a guy who sort of curates your boxing. And it's difficult, and that guy's lifespan is probably going to be reduced by a good decade, and he prematurely grazed, but you probably end up with hopefully a good collection of content.
Yeah, you've been doing this since 2011.
Yes.
Years.
I lost a lot of hair.
Years.
Had a lot more hair when I started. But the other way is you sort of hand over the franchise, or you hand over the platform to a single promoter, which is what ESPN has done, what DAZN. And there are advantages, disadvantages of both. The advantage being it's simple. You know, you really, you know, minimal supervision. You don't have to sort of start from scratch every month. You know, disadvantages, you're largely limited to that talent pool. And, you know, I think you lose some of the independence, you know, ideally, you know, and depending on, you know, who you partnered with, you know, the results can vary.
I'm looking at your Wikipedia now, and my friend Chris de Blasio, can we get someone in to beef that up a little bit there?
It's a little skeletal.
lagging.
Yeah, it's a little skeletal.
Well, skeletal is good because there's a little mystery there. Native of El Paso, Texas, Coronado High School, 88. Hey, Espinoza is about as old as me. He is of Mexican descent. He's a smart guy. He attended Stanford University, BA in Communications in '92. That resulted in him winning a Taub Award the BWAA bestowed upon him. While at UCLA, he began working under sports agent Lee Steinberg, and then he moved on to Zifrin Brittingham LLP. Who's the bigger dick, Zifrin or Brittingham?
Neither one. They're both really smart guys. Two of the smartest guys.
No, I didn't say smart, but good guys.
Definitely, yeah, without question.
Mm-hmm. Is specializing in entertainment law, and he kind of came out of nowhere. Not to the people that made the decision, but to the people like me. He was lead counsel at Golden Boy Promotions during a very interesting era, and then 2011 announced as the new head of Showtime Sports, replacing Ken Hirschman. What is Ken Hirschman doing these days? Anyone? He's not in boxing
Crickets,
anymore.
Yeah,
He's not in boxing anymore. All right. Hey, and maybe that's the good choice.
No, you're absolutely right.
No, that's not the right answer.
There are days when we're all pulling our hair out, but you know, certainly we're not doing this for any reason other than love the sport. I mean, you know, the sport is too aggravating to do otherwise.
Right.
Yeah.
A constant, I don't want to say a struggle. I don't want to be Mr. Whiny Negativo. I go up and down with the sport. I try to find the good things in it. I just had Gabriel Flores, who was signed to Top Rank at 16, now 18 years old. His mom died tragically in 2013. And I try to find the guys to lift up and bolster. I try to find the positivity as much as I can. Sometimes it's hard, though. And I bet for you as well. And just because your pay grade is higher, it doesn't mean aggravations don't occur. One thing that I think probably could be aggravating to you, and I share this a little bit with you in that I'm in the media sphere and the writing sphere and the tech sphere, which is dying off. But when people are saying to you, well, I saw what happened to HBO. I bet Showtime's not going to be in boxing. And I the same thing to me, boxing and media and text somewhat dying off. Is that aggravating hearing that? And how many times a day do you have to answer that? Or how many times a week?
Look, we all know where that comes from. It comes from a couple of guys who have virtually no business with us or no business with us, and pure speculation. It's wishful thinking. Among other things, if you remember back last fall, we announced a 3-year deal with PBC. So that's an intention at that point, clearly to be in business for several years, and nothing has changed since then. I mean, since then we've seen the emergence of Deontay Wilder as a bona fide star. We are continuing to invest in developmental properties like Showbox. We're not going anywhere. We've been here 35 years. The sport does well. The sport changes, the business changes, the media landscape changes, the technology changes. If we don't change with it, then we will be obsolete. But we, have certainly no intention of going that way. So there's no look. Our old CEO Leslie Munez was a big boxing fan and was very supportive and enjoyed the sport personally, but that wasn't the reason why we were in the sport.
Who's the new CEO?
Our new CEO is Joe Iannello, who was prior CFO, who's also a boxing fan.
Got a good Italian name.
That's right. You're right.
I mean, not that names or anything mean anything or whatever, but right. I feel like a Joe Iannello probably likes boxing.
Well, he's been very supportive. And
good.
The reality is, it takes more than support, to make it work. The fact is,
it takes results, doesn't it, Stephen?
It does, because I can be the smartest guy in the world, the nicest guy in the world, or whatever it is. If boxing isn't driving business, then I'm not. My job is short-lived. Chris de Blasio's job is short-lived in the boxing program. But the reality is,
or we'd have to transition to doing what my friends at HBO are doing. You're doing documentaries and other sports, and we get it. It's capitalism. The older I get, the more I try to get that, because I try to live under the rules that people are living under, not the rules as I wish them to be. And there's that fine line, right, in life. How much do I hammer how I wish it to be, and how much do I traffic in the reality of what is? Along those lines, am I right or wrong in feeling like maybe we're sort of stagnant? I feel like there's sometimes between 300 and 400,000 hardcore boxing fans in the United States, and I want that number to jump. Am I wrong? And by the way, let me preface this by saying that I usually have Stephen in, and I usually feel he bucks me up when I'm feeling a little bit low about the sport. He comes up with some numbers and some trends and such, but I do feel like we're a little bit stagnant, and we're at that between 300,000 and 400,000 zone. Am I wrong?
Well, I think that number is fairly accurate for a core hardcore.
Right.
That whether we're talking about Showbox, which those are not names. It's high quality fights, but you really have to be a boxing fan. That's the core there. Some of the smaller fights, even on big platforms like ESPN, are getting that amount.
Right.
But I think right now what the audience is adjusting to is the saturation. And the reality is there's an education period, and the casual fan doesn't know what to watch. The casual fan, we forget how casual fans, and it's a term that we throw around a lot. Who's the casual fan? I consider the casual fan somebody who is willing to watch boxing, who's, maybe they're flipping around, maybe whether it's a pay-per-view, whether it's a slow night at home, they're open. They stumble on it and they're willing to. I'd say that's a casual fan who, hears that the boxing is open to it. And the problem with such a wide variety of platforms and a pure tonnage of fights, it is watered down. It's sort of like, if you televised, and I mean this with all due respect, if you televised all of, gave a national television deal to minor league baseball, and are you gonna, does it deserve to be on television? Does it deserve to be seen? Sure, maybe not nationally, but there's a market for it, and there are certainly people who enjoy minor league baseball as much as major league. But the reality, are, certainly at Showtime, and I think the larger platforms, we have a responsibility to the sport, and to our own businesses to not just put on tonnage, not just filler. ESPN may need filler. DAZN may need filler. They may need tonnage and content for new services. That's great for those businesses. Is it good for the sport? Is it good for the promotion?
It's not even written in stone that it's great for those businesses.
It's a valid question. A valid question.
Right. And listen, guys, I'm not, because Stephen's here, I'm not going to be reflexively hammering the other guys. I don't think that's.
I'm not, and I'm not trying to.
No. You're fair. You're a pretty fair and balanced guy.
Yeah.
But we want to traffic in reality here, and something that I've gone to an analogy is the Golden Corral analogy. We have 150 menu items at Golden Corral, but my thinking is that none of them are A grade, and you don't leave Golden Corral saying, Jesus, gotta come back to Golden Corral. You're kind of saturated and you're full, but the recipe for mac and cheese isn't majestic, and the roast beef has been there since 1976, et cetera, et cetera. So not to be slamming, but I have to agitate on behalf of the fans, because I am one, and I want to keep hammering that same message. It's got to be the best, fighting the best whenever possible, and I've been seeing it everywhere. No one is above reproach. All of us do this too much. All of us are party to it. Too many showcase fights. And Jesus, when are we getting the memo that is not going to work? But then again, sometimes it does work, because the matchmakers and the promoters are very canny. They match fighter A against fighter B. And all right, I don't want to call it out, but I'll use this as an example. And you might refute it, frankly. I believe Danny Garcia was matched very smartly this weekend against Adrian Granados, who I believe matchmakers and promoters understood where he was. And Danny looked like an all-star, and he was aggressive, and he whacked him out. He came out, and geez, the buzz about Danny Garcia, and Danny is back, and now we have him in the mix against the fellow 147s. And I don't want to be yanking aside the curtain all the time, because then I'm no fun. But I think everyone does too much of that. I think probably my friends Saturday night did the same thing. They knew what Amir Khan was. So plenty of blame to go around. I want everyone to be elevated and to do the right thing. I'm not leaving anyone out. I'm saying everyone got to be better at it. Am I wrong? And you can start with Danny Garcia first.
Sure. And let's see. You said a lot. Let me try to.
I do.
Let's see. Let me try to unpack it. Yes, and again, trying to be as objective as I can. And when it comes to the Garcia fight, I'll tell you up front. It's a little bit difficult for me to be objective, because, and not for the reason why I think you might think. I really, really like Adrian Granados as a person, as a fighter. He's a nice kid. He is, gives 100% effort. One of the tallest guys. I mean, he's toughest guys in terms of his heart, his determination. He's been fighting at 47. He really doesn't belong there. He really belongs at 140, but he's not getting the fights there. So I don't consider that a showcase. Was it Danny's toughest fight? No, but like that, I consider a perfectly good in-between fight. Is it world title unification? Is it the Thurman fight? No. But is it competitive? Is it action-based? Do both guys have a shot? Look, it certainly would have been an upset for Granados to win. But I think it would have been less of an upset against Danny Garcia than against Sean Porter. Sean Porter is so much more physical than Danny. Put aside the punching power. Now, I sent a tweet that night toward the latter end of the foul. It was actually before the fight ended, but early on, just sort of saying, hey, look, people have always underestimated Danny, and people forget. He gets flack for this fight or that fight, but from start to finish, his resume is pretty incredible. And every once in a while, after you fight the kind of fights, do you deserve an in-between fight? I wouldn't call this a tune-up fight. I think this fight was it top tier? No. But was it, competitive and evenly matched? Was it a 70-1 slaughter? No, it wasn't anything like that. So I think what I would ask of fans, I think we need to expect of fans and media, is not every fight can be a monster fight. So a little bit of patience and understand that, if you fought two really tough fights, there are some guys, they want to go out with a bang. The last 4 fights are, top star. Someone like Danny, a little time off. This is, I think, a perfectly acceptable fight.
Don't disagree. Didn't slam it coming in. More so talking about how the fans react afterwards. And,
yeah. And I think,
and by the way, I'm also not slamming Triple G taking on Steve Rolls. I feel like a veteran has sort of earned the right. Now, you can't argue. Now, see, money and revenue and payments and stuff can really sort of muddy the mix, because people can say, well, wait, why are you getting $15 million to fight Steve Rolls? That question does bear asking, because could the money be better spent? So I guess my point there is I'm recalibrating. I'm trying to figure out all these new platforms and such, and all this money sloshing around, and I'm trying to figure out as I go too.
Yeah, and look, I think it's incumbent on the sport. Now that I've asked something to fans, I think what the sport needs to deliver is Danny's got to take a top tier fight next. I think he wants that, and I think he will. I think this whole weekend's happening with Crawford and Conn. I think everyone who knows the fight was not surprised by the outcome. It was a little strange to me to hear Arum say that Danny Garcia is not a real opponent for Terrence Crawford, when Danny Garcia had knocked out Amir Khan 5 years ago. So, look, boxing is not that simple. There's no transitive property here of boxing, but it does sort of bear on, well, you're fighting a guy that Danny knocked out 5 years ago, and you're saying he's not a real opponent. I think what I'd like to see a little bit more, you and I have talked about this in the past, was, a little bit more honesty in the sport. And I think, there's marketing and there's puffery and there's selling, and then there's pure dishonesty, trying to sell something as something it's not. This was not. Isn't
that what promoters are kind of there for?
I think so, but
or should they not be as egregious?
Well, no other sport markets itself by misrepresenting what it is. When Alabama is taking an early season game against Northwest Louisiana State, they're not saying that this is the second coming, this is the national championship, this is something that football fans will talk about for decades to come. It's a game on the schedule, and there'll be more games to come. And there'll be plenty of people who go to it and enjoy it, and Alabama fans will, have tailgate, and it'll be a great event. But they don't present it as such. When the Giants play the Cowboys, great, it's a big rivalry. When they play, the Cleveland Browns, typically, no one's saying this is like a Super Bowl preview that that is going to be remembered by NFL films for years to come. So I think
more marketing being done in boxing than any other sport. It puts everyone in a difficult position. sometimes I fall prey to the marketing myself. Bob Arum is a master at it. And I did note during the week as I was watching, I was writing about it for NY Fights and Bad Left Hook and Ring, etc. Arum was pulling out all the stops.
Mm-hmm.
He was saying, this will be one for the ages. You'll tell your grandkids about it. He was telling me on Tuesday that it was really trending tremendously well regarding what the pay-per-view numbers were going to be. He promised a classic for the ages in the main event. He was pulling out stops that I haven't seen him pull out for a while. And part of me does look back and appreciate the entertainment value of it, the superiority, and just in that space, he's top tier. However, there can be the blowback when there isn't the delivery, and not just Arum. We've had this. Let's see. There's been 3 pay-per-views, and I did take to Twitter, and people said, "Well, you know what? There hasn't been the bang for the buck and the delivery on those pay-per-views that we all would have liked from a value perspective." And so, God, it is complicated. That pay-per-view and asking that premium extra charge can really muddy the mix, because, man, if you don't deliver after hyping it up, and this goes for all the presenters and all the purveyors, then there can be the blowback. And Jesus, I'm a consumer. I want to be happy with my purchase. You do. All of them should want that. And it's been a little bit of a hard slide, and Top Rank was the latest, and ESPN, the latest purveyor on the pay-per-view.
Well, and
I guess I'm sort of roundabout way saying the pay-per-view can make it harder to market. Yes,
it does. You know, and I don't want to point fingers and not acknowledge our role in this. But let's look at those. Yeah. I'll make this may be a subtle distinction, maybe overly subtle, but going into Spence Garcia, there were questions about how Mikey would size up physically, and I think those got addressed as we got later in the promotion. We saw Mikey was filling out pretty well. So going into that, it was a matchup of 2 top 10 pound for pound guys. And, I think there are those who thought that the weight may prove to be too big an obstacle to overcome, but that's not what happened. What happened had nothing to do with weight or size. We saw, at least in my eyes, an Errol Spence that was defensively a whole level better than we had ever seen from Errol Spence before. And he just didn't allow Mikey to get any sort of rhythm and establish any momentum. So the fight turned out to be one-sided, but that doesn't mean that what everyone was selling before wasn't, an honest account of what it was expected to be. It was a matchup of 2 top 10.
Right, and let me interject and say that many smart people, maybe smarter than I, Teddy Atlas or what have you, many smart people were saying, no, this is a legit matchup, and they were picking Mikey. So this is all, people must be smart about how they analyze and understand that, go back and look what people said before, because everyone tries to appear smarter afterwards, right? But check what they said before, okay? Right. Were you all saying that this is what's going to happen before, that this is a mismatch, or were you saying, no, this is what's going to happen? Everyone tries to seem smart in retrospect, but go back and read them tweets.
And look, and let's address, let's shine the light on our own events. I thought Adrian Broner would be more competitive against Pacquiao. I thought Pacquiao at his age is probably unavoidably slowed down a little bit with age. I think Adrian would be motivated by this opportunity, and he just couldn't put it together either. So I think. Do
you look at AB differently now, and have you lost some luster as far as, because we can't? I mean, I can't. I don't think any of us should be. I think next time he's in, we got to be saying, all right, guy, we're not over-promising here because you've been under-delivering. Is that too harsh?
No, I don't think it is. I think the reality is, he showed up professionally. He didn't come in overweight. He definitely trained hard. He looked like a guy who was taking it seriously. So that's the minimum, right? that you don't get credit for that, but you at least acknowledge, look, he took it seriously, it wasn't a joke. But yeah, whether it's training or strategy or conditioning, his activity level is not at the point that he is competitive at the top tier. Can he improve his punch output? I don't know if he can or not. That's really
I think that's the way we present it now. Yeah. I don't know. It's totally on him to prove now. I root for him. I think as the human being, the dad who has kids. I try to keep coming back to that human side about it. Let's talk about. Did you watch those fights on Saturday? There, did you? Did you skip around on the DVR? Did you tune into the Crawford against Khan? And did you see Bob try to steal the show after? Oh my goodness, was that a performance? What about Saturday night?
I was sort of I was tuning in. I missed most of Verdejo, but I saw the rest of the card.
You didn't overly miss much on Verdejo. Mm-hmm. That's another story there. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, Shakur Stevenson, look, all these are promising guys, but, the one thing that we see about boxing, you just don't know until you put them in with real competition. So there are some young guys. I mean, we go even to like a Devin Haney, who a lot of people are excited about. Yes, he's progressed, and yes, he's advanced. How good is he? We won't know until you put in with a real guy. Teofimo Lopez is very exciting, got a big personality, and could be one of the future stars, but we don't know how good he actually is till we step him up in the level of competition. And I don't mean to, I'm not trying to throw cold water, because I
appreciate it. You're mentioning your own people there. As long as we're being intellectually consistent, Stephen, and I think I'm talking about boxing, and I'm talking about politics, I'm talking about everything. If we can get it back to there and be intellectually consistent, right, then I think we're on firmer ground.
Well, here's the other thing.
And we're not always on firm ground here in the United States.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm uplifting you or depressing you further.
Keeping it real is what we need.
What I think we need to get more in the habit of doing is, within the sport, promoter to promoter, network to network, even fan to fan, you don't have to shit on somebody else to support your guy. So the fact is, Teofimo Lopez, he's a top-ranked guy. He's on ESPN. I'm not going to have access to him in the foreseeable future. I don't have to down-talk him to make, a young guy that we're working with, like a Devin Haney or Teron Ennis. It's not necessary, and I think we should all be able to acknowledge, he's a talented, entertaining young kid, and that's not to take away. I shouldn't feel obligated to say, none of those guys over on DAZN are any good. None of those guys on ESPN are any good. No, there's talent everywhere. And I think we need to go. There are some main culprits within the sport whoever they're working with is, in fact, the best in the world, and everyone else is trash. And that sort of turns into an endless cycle, because then someone else responds, well, no, actually, your guys are trash. My guys are better. And the next thing you know, everyone's down talking everybody, and we're not elevating the sport in any way whatsoever.
Right, and then we're playing party too. If it bleeds, it leads, and we're focusing on negativity. And then I have to look at myself and say, all right, Mike, how are you giving platform to something that you shouldn't so much? An example is I can be entertained by my friend Bob Arum. Now, I wasn't in the group down front there with the Dans and such, Lances and Dans, and he was really slinging that napalm around after the fight there. And I wrote for Bad Left Hook, and I said, Scamster, that's what he called Heyman. This is the same Heyman whom he said be calling today or tomorrow. He said, I asked him yesterday, he's going to be calling Tuesday or Wednesday. Try to get them on the same page so we can see Spence versus Crawford in timely fashion with both in their athletic primes. I would like that. Is this the art of the deal? Trump-style messaging? One wouldn't think this is a wise approach if one is wanting to find common ground with a rival. Then again, these sorts of capitalists, I wrote, they don't function like you or me. They are often much attuned not to emotion or feelings, but to revenue generation possibilities. Who knows, maybe that harangue wasn't a pre-deal maker, deal breaker. It's interesting.
Well,
It gets me talking. It gets me
Sure.
thinking. It's provocative. In the end run, does it benefit him the most? Does it benefit the fans the most? I guess it remains to be seen.
yeah, I mean, look, let's take the words first and dismiss those. The language is unacceptable. I mean, it's that kind of rhetoric. It's unproductive. It reflects poorly on the sport. This is one of the times where you sort of wish that we had a commissioner that, when someone's doing, there is no bent shirt, you're free to express your opinions, but that kind of stuff for the good of the sport is best kept out of the public view. It certainly doesn't make all of us in the sport look like professionals. And then when you go to, a network and they start Googling, researching the sport, or you go to a sponsor and you're trying to sell them, to entering the sport, and they Google this, and there's this kind of rhetoric going on, and it's pointless. And it really,
do you have an example of when you tried to make a deal, or of a situation where someone was Googling and were like, no, I'm not getting in here. That's too dirty a pool.
There are plenty. I mean, there are networks who are not in the sport that find it, distasteful because of the kind of rhetoric that goes on and the kind of behavior they see regularly from the participants. And not that major sports are devoid of that. The NFL has its issues, the NBA has its issues too. But at least the principals, generally don't engage in that kind of rhetoric, which reflects negatively on their own product. But then let's talk about the business aspect of it. I think there's a lack of, and we can sort of apply this, there's a lack of critical thinking in general in the world. But let's limit it to boxing.
Yes, please.
So if we take him at his word that he wants, Crawford, Spence, was that a wise, and again, I'm not speaking for Al, I don't know what, I literally have not spoken to Heyman about it whatsoever. So I'm just sharing my own opinions.
It would be an unorthodox way of doing it.
It's an unorthodox way to set the stage. If I perceive you, Michael, as difficult to deal with,
Scamster Woods.
It's scamster, but I need to go through you to get a deal done. What are the things that I would do to sort of introduce, to smooth my way into
Call me
the
a
deal?
scamster.
Well, that certainly wouldn't help.
Buy me lunch if you're going to call me.
That's true. So, in that regard, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense that if you're trying to make a deal that you...
I'm fascinated to see how it plays out because Trump style, art of the deal, unorthodox.
Yeah, unorthodox. I mean, look, not just that, there's... look, my pet peeve is sort of, again, the absolute dishonesty. I mean, there's, very deep along the line of this is, this story that Bob has perpetuated that, the only reason that Mayweather-Pacquiao happened is because, Moonves, our CEO at the time, sort of held a gun to everyone's head and said, no more fights on Showtime until this happens. It's absolute fiction. By the way, it doesn't even make sense. The guy was my boss. He doesn't have to threaten me. He's got the ultimate threat. Like,
did he sort of not come on in and say, MFers, get this done?
Not in that sense, because
he didn't say MFers.
No. He said, look, did he want it? Sure. Was he threatening and leveraging? No. He just said, look, there's got to be a way to happen. I want to see this happen. Boxing fans want to see it happen. Like, how can I help make this happen? Like, what can I do? Let's make this happen for the good of the sport. It's gone on long enough,
right?
But
let me put it to you real point blank and quick. You, the fan, wouldn't you like to see Spence and Crawford right now, athletic primes?
Yeah, of course. Here's the way I look at it. And again, speaking for myself, I haven't spoken to him. If I'm in Heyman's shoes, I'm saying, look, I've got, Crawford here, and I've got to go through this obstacle and listen to this kind of bullshit and deal with this. And I've got equally good fights like, Thurman and Porter and unifications. Which would I lean to? They're all great fights. Spence Crawford is a good fight. Spence Thurman, Spence Garcia, Spence Porter. those are all, I think, equally good fights, and some of them, most of them, are unifications. So just, sometimes life is too short. If that's the way someone on the other end of the table is going to be acting, I'm going to go the other way if I have an equally good choice. So I'm not saying
and I guess you and I could be debating equally good choice. Bob has been pretty masterful at sort of ginning it up and tantalizing the fans. I feel like I'm sort of in that lot. I see these are the two young guns who are absolutely resolute in believing that they are the best and the brightest, and there's an aura to each of them. So to that end, if I'm outside looking in, would I tell Bob, geez, there might be another way to prosecute and litigate and do this? There may well be a better way. He's gonna do it his way. He's 87 years old and shit. He's gonna do it his way. Yeah.
But I think you're letting him off the hook here because he's a very intelligent, very strategic thinker. So that was said for a purpose. What the purpose is, only Bob knows. But
that being what?
The entire rant.
Okay.
That entire rant, and I don't know what's in his head, but I can't see any way in which that entire rant was calculated to make a fight happen. So the question is, okay, what is he actually trying to achieve? Is it just manipulation of public sentiment? Is it sort of acceptance? He knows that the next fight for Crawford is not going to be, the one that fans want, so he's trying to soften the blow.
Or he knows the next fight for Spence is not going to be this one.
Right, and maybe he's trying to poison the well, or maybe he's trying to lay the groundwork to be able to say, well, look at this. I threw a big tantrum. I tried to make the Spence fight happen.
Do we need Jimmy Carter to come in? I know that's not an up-to-date reference.
Kissinger.
Why are we bringing two 80 and 90-year-old guys into it? I don't know. Who is the appropriate term to use these days? Who is the grand takes on mediator now? If there isn't one.
No, exactly. And that's
problematic.
Trudeau?
No. He's on the ropes right now. He's been taking too many vacations on the people's time.
True.
All right. So, hey, you made yourself clear on that. I appreciate it. And so I appreciate you coming in. So I appreciate Bob will come on and we'll take the questions too. All the guys who will stand in on the firing line and take the questions. I appreciate it.
In the hot box, in the sweat box. Literally.
Yeah. Are you sweating yet?
I am.
No.
I am.
Are you?
I would have worn short sleeve shirt. Yeah.
Because you know the questions are going to be so hard. No, de Blasio is always here to be the cool. People are like, who's de Blasio? I'll tell you who de Blasio is. Get me at Woods 1069. Hey, Stephen, at times I think you do read at NY Fights.
Yes,
we've been bolstering
absolutely.
right now because I got a new firm, Paradynamics. They've got me up to speed, and I'm an old school guy, kind of too much. And I've realized that.
I saw your post on SEO. It is.
Yeah, well, SEO is where it's at. Paradynamics has helped me out, get me into 2019 and, the search terms, because I was always like, well, if you have content, they will come. Or not.
Right.
So I've kind of gotten up to speed. I'm trying to admit it, sort of like I don't, I got to admit what I don't know and get help.
Well, my name will drive a huge search. You'll see it, I'm sure.
I'm getting
Paradynamics. It's go off the hook as we speak.
What should be what preferred search term do you want? Stephen Espinoza and what? What do you want?
I'd rather there are terms I prefer not, and I'm not going to use them because that's just going to perpetuate the SEO results. So
I'm trying to think what those are now.
You can guess.
Stephen Espinoza, Stanford. Stephen Espinoza, Showtime, boxing boss.
Stephen Espinoza net worth, that comes up every time. Net worth.
What is your net worth? What do they say is your net worth?
Yeah, no, I didn't even look down the page.
Well, you want me to Google it now? No, you don't. you set me up. Set us up.
Let's debate my net worth.
That's right. You're signed to do this for how much longer?
A couple more years under the current contract.
Please, less vague. Less vague.
Less vague?
Less vague. Couple more years is what, sir?
End of, what's that, 1920? 20, well past 2020.
20, I think I saw 2021.
I wouldn't, let's say hypothetically it's that.
Let's not say hypothetically. I say hypothetically. And so you're in it to win it for that time. You're not going to be jumping off the bandwagon. You're still digging boxing enough to keep doing this silliness.
No,
not silliness.
Again, it is
semi-silliness.
It can be frustrating, but it's also incredibly rewarding. I mean, you what you build within this sport, you build from scratch, and I think that's why fighters are in it. That's why promoters are in it. That's why managers and to a certain extent,
ideally, yeah.
That's why we're all in it. You create your content, your audience from scratch. We've got a lot of help and we've got a big network behind us. But when we help create an event like Mayweather McGregor or Mayweather Pacquiao, it is from scratch. It's not an existing brand. So the reward in this sport is you eat what you kill.
And along those lines, I've written so many times over the past few years, I'm almost tired of it. Once again, the sport in flux, changing landscape and frontier. We got Easter Bartholomew coming up Saturday. This is probably, coin flippish fight. Then we got Wilder against Brazil, not perceived to be a coin flip fight. I would be guessing that Wilder gives us that pound of flesh finish, and he's going to drop and stop Mr. Brazil. You have what degree of interest and excitement for those fights? And then let's talk about traffic in what else we got coming up in the near future for Showtime.
Well, I think lightweight's a really interesting division, and there's a lot of talent in and around lightweight, and there's some makeable fights there. And two of the guys there, Easter and Bartholomew are two of the top guys, two of the top 7 or 8 in the division, and that's what our focus is. You talk about changing landscape, and I think there's one thing that remains constant, and I think this goes across businesses, and this goes across media and across decades. The only businesses that are successful are focused solely on quality. If you look at the top businesses in each sector, if you look at an Apple or a Starbucks or, on and on, they are focused almost singularly on quality. And, that is our focus. I'm not saying that we always have the biggest fight on all times, but we focus on quality. And I think Easter Bartholomew is a good example of that.
Is Wilder Brazil? Well, not the level that you'd like.
It's not the monster fight, but it is his mandatory, and it is a top 10 or top 12 heavyweight.
This goes back to what we said about living in the world that is not the world as we wish it to be. Yes,
that's true.
Okay.
And I think, look, I can look at the other heavyweights and I said, I think relative to where everyone else is fighting outside of the big fights, certainly this is as competitive and arguably much more competitively matched than other top tier heavyweight fights around right now. So this is not someone that we pulled, from, the bottom of the deck where you see the fight announced and you say, who's that guy? Never heard of him. That's a unique phenomenon here. And this is how I think one of the signs that tells us that, maybe we're reaching a point of saturation. Never before, or never more before than in the last 6 months have I opened up, web browser and saw a fight and seen a name I've never heard of before as a main event.
What was that one? What are we talking?
There's no shortage of
There's a few of them.
There's a lot of them, and I think that's when you're talking about pound for pound guys, in the world taking on somebody who even boxing fans have not heard of. I think that's the kind of thing that hurts the sport.
Yeah, and we can only do so much shoulder programming. By the way, your guy Brian Daly and these crew, you guys are really, last couple of years, really hitting it on all cylinders. But there's only so much you can do. We have so much product, it's hard to introduce guys to people.
Right.
And frankly, it's not easy because people are more cynical than they used to be. Mm-hmm. For instance, you used to be able to say, oh, well, this guy has fought a health situation, cancer, and that makes him someone compelling and we should watch. Well, frankly, that I don't want to say that storyline, but that situation has been presented to people so much now, it's almost old hat. media oversaturation about everything. It's really hard to be fresh and new and find new angles. So I think this is referring back to what you were saying. How do we counteract that? We counteract that by giving people the best, fighting the best. And what you said about quality, giving people quality. You don't have to work so hard to do the shoulder programming to introduce people to these athletes and have them following. If you're having superb fights, letting the fights sell themselves.
That's right. And again, they're not all going to be mega fights, super fights, but there needs to be a level of quality. That's something that we're very focused on, whether it's a big fight, whether it's, occasionally a guy you haven't heard of. Not a lot of people had heard of Castano when he fought Erislandy Lara. That for our money was a fight that was going to be interesting and competitive. And it turned out, we were right. So the reality is, if you're not going to do, the number one guy against the number two guy, the least you have to do is have a competitively matched, entertaining fight. And that's what I think. That's where I think Easter Barthélemy, comes in. That's where I think, Lara versus Castano comes in. Might not be household names, but we know that these are competitively matched fights, and that the winner of these guys is going to go on to championship level, and we'll be there as well.
Let's talk about some of the people that you're excited by. Someone I see getting a lot of buzz, and I'm interested in how he is being presented and marketed, and I want to be more excited about actually seeing him in the ring. Let's get him in the ring there. How about a guy like Javonte Davis?
Javonte is, he's got that quality that you can't really quantify. I guess you can quantify by social media following, and he's got a massive one. But it's not in a calculated way. He is, he tends to draw people, whether it's because he's babyface or his sort of his style in the ring. He is one of the most exciting young fighters. And it's soft-spoken and baby-faced out of the ring, but in the ring, he's an absolute, pit bull. And we're really excited. We're planning to, fingers crossed, knock on wood, all the superstitions, get him a fight at home in Baltimore in July, at the end of July. And I think Baltimore will come out and support him. He is one of their sort of hometown heroes and has literally, lifted himself up from a very tough upbringing, in a rough part of Baltimore, to now become one of the shining lights there. So we're really excited. That's one of those cases where the hometown fight is part of the story. This is something that he's excited about. That's something he's wanted for a long time, and we're glad that it looks like it's going to happen.
The landscape changing once again. I was a little bit thrown by. Maybe you were, maybe you weren't. You probably had the intel months before me, but Fox coming into the game, and now I see that we're having to share content. And whereas Showtime was having a hell of a run, and you had this collection of young gun stars, and then we get a deal done with the people who have the over-the-air outlets there, the Fox folks, and then so now we're having to share, and so now I say, all right, well, guys that I was seeing being featured on Showtime more so, hey, the Charlo twins, now are they going to be on Fox, or are they going to be on Showtime? And I guess that's living in the real world where we are, so you have to deal with that. But what about that? Are allocations being done properly? Are my friends at Showtime, who have been in this for a long time, being properly rewarded? Where are you going to see the Charlos fighting next?
Well, it's a good point. And I think we're so quick to, in today's sort of hyperspeed, draw conclusions. Oh, everybody's going to Fox. Showtime's getting out of the business. I mean, the fact is, yes, there are discussions, within PBC about who gets what games. It's not that different from what, how the NFL allocates games across networks. So would I like to have every single big fight? Sure. Do we have that capacity? No, we don't. And I'd rather be negotiating with PBC to allocate fights on our network than competing with sort of an unaffiliated promoter. So, because I know
everyone's playing nice and getting along.
Absolutely. Jamal Charlo's next fight will be with us in June.
Okay, fair enough. Good to know.
And I think we look forward to having Mikey back and seeing Spence again and being in business with all the same guys. So it's sort of, yes, it's a little bit strange because you don't typically think of, networks collaborating, and strictly speaking, we're not. But for these guys, we are collaborating. They're helping expand the sport, and in particular these guys, and they're doing a good job of it. But the reality is, we fully expect that those top tier premium fights, we're going to continue to get them with the same sort of consistency that we have in the past.
Fair enough. I like talking current events with you because you're intelligent, reasoned analysis, and you do a pretty good job at having the intellectual consistency. Some breaking news that kind of smashed me over the head was Errol Miller testing positive for several different performance-enhancing chemicals. Your thoughts off the top of your head there? That's someone who's been featured on Showtime. I am still trying to wrap my brain around it, and I guess so. Reaction to that, and then also in the bigger picture, PEDs within the sport. Is this something that we can ever really attend to? That's something that latches on to us. It's something that we deal with, and by the way, baseball has, and football does, et cetera. So it's not just us, but really makes that splash within the sport because it's one participant in one fight, and then that screws up the fight. It's not one of whatever the NFL roster is, 80 people or whatever.
Right.
It's one guy. So the focus is on us, and the focus is on boxing, and the focus is on Big Baby Miller.
It is. It's a persistent problem, and it's a bigger problem than any of us know. We've seen Deontay Wilder, fall victim to that with Povetkin. We've now seen it with Errol Miller. Just as an aside, I can't remember a PED positive finding that has been as sort of broad. I've never seen someone test positive for 3, 4 different substances across
GW
3 tests.
15, 16, EPO, HGH.
Three different substances across 3 different tests. I mean, that's I'm glad he sort of fessed up, ultimately, because I don't think it's enough. But the question is, should we be doing more, not just in testing, but in the repercussions? Should there be a financial repercussion? I mean, I know, where
beyond the suspension.
Beyond the suspension, I mean, I'm not talking about a Corral in particular, but look, there are expenses that a network has undertaken. This one, it looks like it happened sufficiently out from the fight that there's going to be a replacement opponent. But what if there wasn't?
Who will be the first network or what have you to attempt to recover some damages?
It's an interesting point. I'm not even sure that it's enforceable, and I'm not sure that it provides any greater incentive.
Yeah, there was some litigation involved for Povetkin, in which that was talked about as sort of recovering damages there.
Yeah, and look, this one was not a huge surprise. I think it was a surprise the way it happened, the extent it happened, but there's been an interview circulating, on social media with Deontay back in 2017, who basically said, implied that he knew that Miller was taking PEDs. So I don't know what the source was and what it was, but it is without question, it's way back, from then. So I think it's sort of an open secret within the sport, and when there's lives at stake, it's sort of inexcusable. Unfortunately, when there are costs involved, and there's more of a financial incentive to cheat than to catch the cheater, and particularly when a lot of the enforcement mechanisms are left up either to a voluntary or to the state. This is one of the areas where I think we really need a national commission. I think there are certain areas, in terms of licensing and enforcement, that I'm not generally in favor for just administration for the sake of administration, but that's where a national commission, whether it's federally aligned or whether it's a private organization, but there's got to be some framework in which these kinds of things can be adjudicated and enforced uniformly.
Your number for your Shields Hammer contest, approximately what was it? Were you happy with it? And where does women's boxing go from here? We had some questions off Twitter ask him about that.
Yeah, the Shields Hammer number was, it's a work in progress. We know that there's still some resistance within the sport to women's boxing. And
Did the number indicate that we
future-
saw more resistance than we were hoping or thinking?
Not really, because, relative to what that was, and it was sort of a tweener. It wasn't really a show box, and it wasn't, championship. Certainly the main event was championship caliber, but the event as a whole. So of these tweeners, what we call special editions, that was, Chris, keep me honest, it was the highest rated, second highest rated of what we've done. And that's, comparing to all male fights. So when we talk apples to apples fights of this sort of scope and stature, she's at the upper end. When we look at show boxes, she had the two most watched show boxes in 2018. So is she going to attract a championship size audience? Not quite yet, but is she growing in leaps and bounds? Absolutely. Now, there have been some observations that, there was that she had actually generated a bigger audience last time that she had fought on Showtime, or at least 6 months ago, the Hannah Gabriel's fight, which was 9 months ago. There's also the realities of the TV market. That was late June. There's not much on television in late June. When we're in March, and we know we're in March, but there's plenty that's going on in March and April, actually. And, not to mention, NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, UFC.
Right, when we're doing measuring, we have to put in context. I'm going to call this the de Blasio lightning round because he wants to bring you somewhere else pretty quick. Questions off Twitter. I like this one. Brian Custer. Do you see Brian Custer getting a raise soon? De Blasio lightning round.
We have a strict policy against negotiating. I'm actually going to have to discipline Brian Custer for that one. I hate to announce that via social media, but you've got breaking news there.
Lance asks, why are you so full of shit? Lance 91226740, fake account from Russia.
It is. It's a habit I've been trying to make, Lance.
Tremendous. Love Twitter. Love freaking Twitter.
Oh, I could entertain myself endlessly.
And we do. We do often. Yeah. What was your favorite tweet?
Wait. Let's go back. Lance,
yeah. Regarding what? How? Yes, Specify, Lance.
Yes, that's right.
How and why full of shit? See, when you get into this with an Espinoza, you gotta be on your A game, man. Yeah. No, you're game for it. Ask him why he turned the notorious MMA mic off. Did you do that?
I wish I had enough time and energy and the wherewithal to control the mics at a press conference. That press conference got put on at such a last minute. There were so many things moving. To think that I had the remote control on the microphones is giving me way too much credit.
And while I find another good question, not from Custer, lobbying for a price, bigger paycheck, talk about set up, tee up next half of the year for Showtime. What can we look forward to?
Well, I think, we've got the event coming out of Vegas this weekend with Easter Bartholomew. And, someone to watch, since I know you've got a lot of the hardcore fans, a name that they've become a little familiar with is F.A. Ajagba, who is going to be the opening fight.
Nice.
9-0, 8 KOs. Went viral with, his opponent, Curtis Harper, walking out of the ring, but that's certainly not all he has to offer. I think he is a very promising young heavyweight prospect, and that's something we saw a couple of them on. We saw 1.5 on the Shields undercard. We saw Jermaine Franklin, and we had an early stoppage in the Otto Aline fight, but those are two other young heavyweights that we've been highlighting. So then we go on to Jamal Charlo in June, Tank Davis in July, and then I think we're going to have a really exciting fall. I mean, we've talked about these unifications, and I think you could see a unification at 154 with Hurd and either Charlo or Harrison. I think we'll end up seeing some unification with Spence. I think you'll see Mikey Garcia getting back at the championship level in the fall. And I think we've set up, we've set up everybody to go on another one of these runs where we've got big fight after big fight.
I think we're going to just about leave it there. Looking forward, we've touched on some different themes here, and I like the themes that we've touched on. We've talked about intellectual consistency, positivity, talked about the need for an oversight commission. Who's the commissioner going to be?
I would have said John McCain, but obviously, that would have been the obvious choice.
Right.
That's no. There's a few people as thoughtful and fair-minded as Michael Woods. So I think he's certainly on the short list.
Wow. I'm going to say I'm tempted to leave it there, but that would be too self-serving. Appreciate it. And short list. Who would want the freaking job?
A short list for the imaginary position.
That's
in my
right.
head.
That is never going to be filled. Yesterday I said, we talked about that. Another person joined the list to run for president, and I tweeted out, I said, who would want to be running for president?
It's a brutal process. Absolutely brutal.
Yeah. Brutal process you're sometimes involved in, but damn, you've been sticking out since 2011. You've mentioned the fights that are upcoming, what we can look forward to. De Blasio, I think, has been reasonably happy. I see him go into his notebook and say, all right, I'm going to have to talk about that later. Only about 3 times.
Right. Yeah,
that's a good ratio.
That's a good ratio.
Lance's Twitter.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, Stephen Espinoza, Chris De Blasio from Showtime. We appreciate you guys coming in so much, and let's do it again, maybe once before the end of the year. Yes?
Absolutely.